This is the church of St Peter and St Paul at Lavenham in Suffolk. It was partly funded by John De Vere, who was a prominent local landowner and also the man who led Henry Tudor's vanguard at Bosworth. Actually, it's quite surprising that John De Vere was still alive to fight for Henry Tudor at Bosworth, because despite Edward IV's relatively conciliatory attitude towards him, he'd shown a sort of stubborn loyalty to the Lancastrian cause throughout his life and a hatred of the Yorkists. Now, Edward had executed Oxford's brother and father, but he hoped, probably unrealistically I suppose, that he could somehow bring the young Earl of Oxford on side. Well, as Oxford's father hadn't been attainted, he was permitted to keep his East Anglian estates and his title, and he was gradually brought back into court life. He was created a Knight of the Bath at the coronation of Elizabeth Woodville, and he married the youngest sister of the Earl of Warwick. But he still remained at heart a Lancastrian, and in 1468 he did confess to plotting against the king. Well, remarkably, Edward pardoned him again, but Oxford then supported Warwick in his bid to overthrow Edward IV in 1469 to 71, and he carried the sword of state at the recrowning of Henry VI. Well, when Edward IV returned from exile to fight for his throne, Oxford joined the Earl of Warwick to fight against him. But he was defeated at Barnet, and it's said that Oxford's failure to keep control of his men was a contributory cause to that defeat. Well, after that, Oxford fled to France, but he got funding from the French, and he acted as a sort of pirate, really. He raided Calais, and then he ended up holed up in St Michael's Mount. Well, the Yorkists blockaded him there for 6 months, until in February 1474, Oxford was forced to surrender. Well, he'd spend the next 10 years of his life as a prisoner over at Calais in Ham's Castle. And in 1478, he actually jumped off the walls, either in a bid to escape or possibly to commit suicide. However, he survived, and interestingly, Edward still refrained from taking the easy way out and having him executed. Well, I think that Richard III saw things differently, and in 1484, he ordered Oxford to be brought back to England. But actually, Oxford managed to escape from Ham's Castle with the help of his jailer, and he went and joined Henry Tudor in France. Now, it's sometimes said that Henry was delighted to have this die-hard Lancastrian on his side, but of course it could have been a bit awkward because some of his other supporters were former Yorkists who Oxford would have fought against, for example, at Barnet. When it came to Henry's invasion of England and the Battle of Bosworth, the Earl of Oxford, he commanded Henry's vanguard, which was a mixed force of former Yorkists, old Lancastrians and French mercenaries, and it was his defeat of the Ricardian vanguard under the Duke of Norfolk and his son the Earl of Surrey that paved the way for Henry's victory. While Oxford certainly reaped the rewards for his support of Henry Tudor, he was made Admiral, Constable of the Tower of London, and he was given extensive estates, especially in East Anglia. He carried on fighting. He led the Royal Vanguard at Stoke. He led the invasion of France in 1492, and he began the attack on the Cornish rebels at Blackheath in 1497. He was frequently visited by Henry VII, but the often repeated line that Henry fined him for having too many retainers is simply not true. While Oxford died in March 1513, and it's odd really, 6 months later his old adversary at Bosworth, the Earl of Surrey, would of course be leading an English army to victory at Flodden. Let's just go back and look at the church for a moment. If you look at the porch, you'll see that over the entrance on each side there are a couple of creatures. They look like sheep, but actually they're boars. And if you look at the doors to the porch, it's much clearer. And why they're there is that the boar, obviously it was a badge of Richard III, but it was also a badge of the De Veres, and actually it was a play on words because veres in Latin meant boar. The difference was that Richard's boar was a white one and the Earl of Oxford's was a blue one, and I guess it's his victory at Bosworth that explains why there are quite a number of blue boar pubs around even today. But it does make you think, doesn't it? Because we were all very excited when we found that boar badge when we were looking for the battlefield of Bosworth, and obviously we say it belongs to Richard III, or at least to one of his retainers, and it probably did. But of course there is just this possibility that rather than being a boar badge relating to Richard III, it could have been one relating to the Earl of Oxford.